lonely cowboy found two broken Apache women. Next day, their father arrived with a shocking offer. Jack McAllister was a man of few words. He had spent most of his life alone, wandering the vast deserts and plains of the Southwest. The wind had been his constant companion, the endless sky his ceiling, and the rugged land his home. Once, long ago, he had a family, a wife and a little boy, but both were taken from him by a fever that swept through their small town. Since then, Jack had learned to survive in silence, finding comfort in his routines and the predictable rhythm of life on horseback. He rarely spoke to anyone, and strangers were a curiosity he neither sought nor avoided. Life for him had become a quiet journey across open lands, with only the occasional campfire and the stars to mark the passing of days. On a late afternoon, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Jack rode along a dry riverbed. The ground was cracked and dusty, the kind of dry that makes every step heavy and every breath a little rougher. His horse, a sturdy brown mare named Daisy, trotted carefully over the uneven stones, her hooves clattering softly. Jack scanned the horizon, looking for signs of water or shelter. The land around him was harsh, unforgiving, and beautiful in its own way. Red cliffs rose in the distance, casting long shadows, while the wind whispered through the sparse scrub and cacti. It was then that he noticed them. At first he thought they might be animals, shadows moving unnaturally in the sun's last light. But as he drew closer, the truth became clear. Two young women were lying on the ground, barely moving. Their clothes were torn and dirty, their hair tangled and dusty. One of them tried to sit up, but her strength was gone, and she fell back with a soft groan. Jack's first instinct was caution. In these lands, encounters could be dangerous, especially with those who were not from his side of the world. But something in the way they looked at him, eyes wide, frightened yet pleading, stirred a sense of compassion he had not felt in years. Dismounting, Jack approached slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Hey," he said in a calm voice, "careful not to startle them." "I'm not going to hurt you." His words hung in the warm air. The sisters looked at each other, then back at him, fear still present but tempered by hope. He noticed bruises on their arms and scratches across their faces. They were exhausted, probably hungry and thirsty, and the harsh desert sun had taken its toll on them. Jack knew that if he didn't act quickly, they might not make it through the night. He knelt down beside them. "Can you stand?" he asked softly. The older sister tried, but her legs wobbled under her. Jack put one arm around her shoulders and helped her up, then turned to the younger one, who leaned heavily on him. Step by step, he guided them to a nearby cluster of rocks where the shade was slightly cooler. He handed them water from his canteen. Their hands shook as they drank, and he waited patiently, giving them time to regain some strength. "I'm Jack," he said, finally offering a small smile. "What's your names?" The older sister swallowed hard. "Island," she whispered. The younger one followed, voice barely audible. "Naya." Jack nodded. "All right, Island, Naya. You're safe now." He scanned the area once more, ensuring there was no immediate danger. Then he helped them stand again. "Can you walk with me? There's a place not far from here where you can rest properly." The sisters exchanged hesitant glances. Jack understood. They were not used to trusting strangers, especially men they did not know, but the kindness in his eyes and the steady tone of his voice seemed to convince them. Slowly, they allowed him to support them as they moved across the dusty terrain. Jack noticed how fragile they seemed, yet there was a quiet strength in their eyes, a determination to survive. By the time they reached Jack's cabin, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of orange and purple across the sky. The cabin was small but sturdy, made of weathered wood and surrounded by a simple corral for his horse. The smoke rose from the chimney, and the scent of simmering stew filled the air. Daisy nickered softly as they approached, and Jack guided the sisters inside. "Sit here," he said, gesturing to chairs by the fire. He filled a pot with water and placed it on the stove. "You'll need to eat and drink before you do anything else." Aylin and Naya sat cautiously, glancing around the cabin. It was modest, with a few shelves of books and tools, a wooden table, and a bed pushed into the corner. There was a sense of calm here, a stark contrast to the chaos the sisters had endured. Jack busied himself with preparing a simple meal: beans, bread, and water. The sisters watched quietly, their eyes still wary but curious. He placed plates before them, and they ate slowly, careful not to overwhelm themselves. As they ate, Jack observed their faces, noting the deep fatigue, the lingering fear, and the quiet resilience that had brought them this far. He did not press them to speak. Words could come later, when they were ready. For now, safety and nourishment were enough. After the meal, Jack brought blankets and helped the sisters to the small bed in the corner. Aylin and Naya lay down carefully, leaning against each other for support. Jack draped a blanket over them and sat nearby, keeping watch as they drifted into a much-needed sleep. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light across the room. Outside, the desert night was quiet, with only the occasional rustle of wind or distant animal sound breaking the stillness. As he watched them, Jack felt a strange mixture of emotions. Compassion, yes, but also a flicker of something he had long thought lost: hope. These two young women, broken by circumstances beyond their control, had somehow crossed paths with him, and in helping them, he felt a purpose that had been missing from his solitary life. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. There were dangers in the world, both from nature and from men who might not look kindly upon his actions. But for the first time in years, he felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Hours passed, and the sisters slept peacefully, their breathing steady. Jack finally allowed himself to relax, though he remained alert. He thought about the harsh lands beyond the cabin walls and the journey that must have brought Alan and Naya here. He wondered about their family, about the lives they had been forced to leave behind, and about the courage it had taken to survive this far. He had faced hardships in his own life, but seeing the resilience in these young women reminded him that strength could take many forms. Jack did not know what the next day would bring. Perhaps their family would come searching. Perhaps the world outside would intrude upon their fragile peace. But for tonight, he would guard them. He would ensure they slept safely and that the darkness of the desert did not claim them. He had found them broken, yes, but in helping them, he felt a spark of connection he had not experienced in years. It was a small flame, but enough to light the long, lonely path he had walked for so long. As the night deepened, Jack stepped outside briefly, leaning against the wooden railing of his cabin. The stars stretched endlessly above, bright and silent. He breathed in the cool desert air, feeling the stillness settle around him. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, its surprises, perhaps even danger. But for now, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He had found the two sisters when they were at their lowest, and he had offered them safety and warmth. In doing so, he had, in a small way, healed a piece of his own lonely heart. Jack returned to the cabin, sat by the fire, and watched the flames dance. The quiet was profound, yet comforting. He did not know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing: he would face it, not alone, but with Aylin and Naya nearby. For the first time in many years, the life of the lonely cowboy felt a little less empty. The morning sun crept over the horizon, painting the desert in soft golds and pinks. Jack McAllister was already awake, tending to Daisy, his loyal horse. He brushed her coat and fed her oats, all the while keeping an eye on the small cabin. Inside, the two sisters, Eileen and Naya, were stirring. Their sleep had been deep, but now the sunlight brought awareness of the harsh world outside. Slowly they sat up, wrapping the blankets around their shoulders. The events of the previous day still weighed on their minds, but the cabin felt safe, and Jack's calm presence made them feel almost normal for the first time in a long while. Jack entered the room with a warm smile. "Morning," he said gently. "You slept well, I hope? There's breakfast ready in a few minutes." Aylin and Naya nodded, shyly acknowledging him. The older sister's eyes met his for a brief moment, gratitude written in the quiet way she held herself. Naya, the younger one, avoided his gaze but clutched the blanket tighter, finding comfort in its warmth. Jack had learned to read expressions carefully over the years. He could sense their unease, their cautious trust. He did not press them for words. Trust, he knew, had to be earned, especially after the hardships they had survived. Jack moved to the stove and checked the stew he had left simmering overnight. Its rich aroma filled the cabin, wrapping the sisters in a sense of comfort. He placed bowls on the table, along with bread and a small pot of water. "Eat slowly," he said. "There's no need to hurry." Aylin reached for a bowl, her hands trembling slightly. Naya followed her sister's lead, and the quiet clatter of spoons against bowls was the only sound in the room. Jack took a seat opposite them, watching patiently. He did not speak much. Instead, he let them set the pace, letting their movements and hesitations guide him. After a few moments, Eileen finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you," she said, her words careful, deliberate. Jack nodded, offering a small smile. "You're welcome. You were hurt and tired yesterday. It's only right you're taken care of now." Her eyes shifted toward Naya, and a faint smile flickered across her lips. Naya, still quiet, looked down at her bowl, finding courage in her sister's words. Jack noticed the subtle bond between them, a connection formed through shared hardships, strengthened by the fact that they had survived together. Once breakfast was finished, Jack encouraged them to rest a bit more while he cleaned the cabin. The sisters moved slowly, the muscles in their arms and legs sore from their journey and injuries. Jack offered his arm when needed, helping them along. He could see how small gestures of kindness, like guiding them or providing water, were helping rebuild a sense of safety in their lives. He knew that emotional wounds often ran deeper than physical ones, and the fear in their eyes was a reminder that trust would take time. As the day wore on, Jack prepared a small area near the cabin where the sisters could sit outside and enjoy the fresh air. The desert, though harsh, had a strange serenity to it. The wind carried the scent of dry sagebrush and distant mountains. Jack brought out a simple wooden bench and encouraged Eileen and Naya to sit while he worked nearby, tending to firewood and checking his supplies. He left them space, knowing that freedom to choose whether to speak or remain silent was important for them to feel in control again. Aylin began to look around, noticing small details she had missed the day before. A few wildflowers had sprouted among the rocks, their bright colors stark against the dusty earth. Naya, sitting beside her, reached out hesitantly to touch the petals. Jack observed quietly, a small sense of joy rising in his chest. These little moments of life, beauty and curiosity, meant that healing, even if gradual, was starting to take root. He wanted to encourage these feelings, knowing that hope and wonder were powerful tools in mending broken hearts. As the sun climbed higher, Island finally spoke again, sharing fragments of their story. Her words were cautious, measured, as though each one had to be weighed before release. She told Jack about the attack on their village, how they had been separated from the others, and how they had survived on sheer willpower and determination. Naya added little details, mostly about their attempts to find food and water. Her voice quiet but firm. Jack listened without interruption, allowing them to speak at their own pace. His own experiences of loss and solitude gave him patience and empathy, understanding that their story was painful but also important for them to tell. Jack asked gentle questions, seeking clarity rather than pressing for more than they were willing to give. He learned that their father was missing and their mother had passed away some time ago. Aylin's voice trembled slightly as she spoke of her mother, but there was pride in how she described the lessons she had been taught, lessons about resilience, honor, and the importance of family. Jack was moved by their strength. Despite being young, they had endured hardships many adults would struggle to survive. He realized that helping them was not just about protecting the physical body. It was about nurturing the spirit that had carried them this far. After their storytelling, Jack suggested a walk nearby. The sisters hesitated at first, afraid of the unknown, but Jack assured them it would be safe. Together, they walked through a narrow trail leading to a small grove of mesquite trees. The shade offered a cool respite from the desert sun, and Jack pointed out small signs of wildlife, tracks in the sand, birds flitting among the branches. Island and Naya listened intently, asking questions about the plants and animals they encountered. Jack explained in simple terms, taking care to make the information both interesting and understandable. He wanted them to feel connected to the land, not just trapped by its harshness. During the walk, Island began to relax. She smiled faintly when a squirrel darted across their path, and Naya's laughter rang out softly when a bird swooped low to inspect them. Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a reminder that small joys could coexist, even with pain and loss. He realized that these moments of connection, observation, and wonder were laying the groundwork for trust. The sisters were learning that the world could hold kindness as well as danger, and Jack was proud to be part of that discovery. Returning to the cabin, Jack offered the sisters clean water and a small towel to wash their faces. He encouraged them to rest again, sensing that fatigue from both the physical journey and emotional strain would take time to fully ease. Island and Naya settled in, each finding comfort in their own way. Jack gave them privacy while he prepared a small space nearby with blankets and cushions for Daisy, ensuring the horse remained comfortable and cared for as well. The quiet rhythm of life in the cabin, punctuated by small chores and attention to detail, was becoming a gentle routine that brought comfort to all of them. As evening approached, Jack lit a fire outside. He encouraged Island and Naya to sit nearby, offering warmth and a sense of security. He shared stories of his own travels, carefully choosing tales that were simple yet full of adventure and life lessons. The sisters listened intently, their eyes bright with curiosity and imagination. Jack realized that storytelling could bridge gaps between experiences and cultures, creating bonds of understanding and empathy. They laughed softly at the humor in his tales and listened seriously to the lessons embedded within. Night settled over the desert, bringing with it the chill and the quiet. Jack brought blankets to Island and Naya once more, ensuring they were warm and comfortable. He watched them drift into sleep, reflecting on the day's events. He knew that their healing would not happen overnight. Fear and trauma were slow to fade, and trust had to be nurtured carefully. But he also knew that progress had been made. The sisters had begun to speak, to share, and to find small moments of joy despite everything they had endured. Jack stood outside for a while, looking at the stars above. The desert sky was vast and endless, a reminder of the world's beauty and mystery. He thought about the bond forming between him and the sisters, a bond that was delicate yet strong. It was built on acts of kindness, patience, and understanding, a foundation that could support much more in the days to come. He felt a quiet hope that, together, they could face the challenges ahead, whatever they might be. That night, Jack returned inside, sitting by the fire one last time. Aylin and Naya slept peacefully, the shadows of the past held at bay for a moment. Jack felt a sense of fulfillment he had not known in years. He had offered safety, nourishment, and understanding, and in doing so, he had reminded himself that life, even after loss, could still hold meaning and connection. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring new challenges and new discoveries, but for now there was peace, trust, and the quiet beginnings of a bond that might change all their lives forever. The next morning, Jack woke before dawn, as he often did, listening to the quiet desert stirring around his cabin. The air was cool and fresh, carrying a scent of dry earth and distant pine. Daisy, his horse, nickered softly as he stepped outside to check the corral. He had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the desert, the way the wind shifted, the way animals moved quietly in the morning, and the way the sun slowly climbed above the horizon, painting the earth in gentle colors. Life in solitude had taught him to notice details, to respect small signs of life, and to appreciate moments of calm. Inside the cabin, Aylin and Naya were just beginning to wake. They had slept soundly for the first time in many nights, a sleep uninterrupted by fear or hunger. Jack watched them from a distance for a moment, feeling a sense of quiet pride. They had come so far in such a short time, adjusting to safety and warmth after their long, harsh journey. He was careful not to intrude, knowing they still needed space to feel comfortable in this new environment. Slowly, they emerged from the bedroom, carrying the tentative smiles of those who are cautiously learning that the world could be kind. Jack greeted them warmly and offered breakfast, as he had the day before. He noticed subtle changes in the sisters' behavior. Aylin's movements were a little steadier, her eyes a little brighter. Naya spoke more freely, though still quietly. The bond between them and Jack was strengthening, built on trust, kindness, and shared understanding. Each small gesture, sharing food, offering a hand, telling a story, helped them believe that safety and care were not fleeting. Jack knew this progress was fragile, but he also knew it was important to nurture it. After breakfast, Jack was finishing his chores when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching from the direction of the trail. At first, he thought it might be a traveler or a messenger passing through, but as the figure grew closer, he realized this was no ordinary traveler. A tall man dressed in traditional Apache clothing appeared in the soft morning light. His movements were deliberate, and his expression was calm but serious. Jack felt a moment of tension rise in his chest. He instinctively put himself between the man and the cabin, aware that encounters with strangers could be unpredictable, especially in this part of the desert. The man stopped a short distance from the cabin and raised his hand in a gesture of peace. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, scanning the surroundings carefully. "I am Tyan," he said, his voice steady. "I am the father of Aylin and Naya." Jack's heart tightened slightly. He had not expected to meet the sisters' family so soon. He felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. But the girls, hearing the voice, froze in place. Aylin's eyes widened, a mixture of joy, fear, and disbelief crossing her face. Naya clung slightly to her sister's arm, uncertain of what to expect. Jack stepped forward cautiously. "I'm Jack," he said calmly. "Your daughters are safe here." I did nothing but help them when I found them yesterday. Tyen's eyes studied him closely, searching for truth in his words and in his demeanor. There was a silence, heavy and charged with unspoken questions. Jack could sense the careful weighing of intentions. Tyen's posture and gaze were respectful but cautious, as if he was ready to defend his daughters if needed. Ayen stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling. "Father, they helped us," she said, motioning toward Jack. "They kept us safe." Naya nodded timidly. Tyen's eyes softened for a brief moment, and he looked at his daughters with a mixture of pride and concern. Then he turned his attention back to Jack. "I have heard your words," he said carefully. "But words are not enough. I must understand why a stranger would help my children, and what it is that you want in return." Jack shook his head gently. "I want nothing. I only saw two people in need and offered them safety. I do not expect reward, nor do I seek anything from you." Tyen considered this for a long moment. The silence stretched, broken only by the gentle rustle of the desert wind. Finally he spoke again, and this time his words carried a surprising weight. "Then I have a proposal," he said. Jack's brow furrowed slightly. He had expected gratitude, suspicion, or perhaps a simple farewell, but not a proposal. Tyen's eyes held a spark of determination. "I am responsible for my people. There are dangers that threaten us all, both from those who seek to harm us and from challenges that we cannot face alone. You have shown skill, courage, and kindness. If you are willing, I ask that you help us protect our family and our people." Jack felt a flicker of surprise and uncertainty. This was not what he had anticipated. His life had been quiet, solitary, predictable. Now he was being asked to step into a world that was complex and potentially dangerous. Yet there was something compelling in Tyen's offer, a chance to do more than simply survive, a chance to make a real difference. Jack studied the man's face, looking for any hint of deception, but found only honesty and urgency. The sisters watched closely, their eyes wide. Island's hand rested lightly on Naya's shoulder, a silent gesture of reassurance. Both seemed to understand that this moment could change everything for them. Jack took a deep breath. I don't know much about your people or your ways," he admitted, "but I do know how to survive in this land. And I do know what it means to protect someone who cannot protect themselves. If my skills can help, then I will help." Tyen nodded once, a small but meaningful gesture. "Then we begin a partnership," he said. Over the course of the morning, Jack and Tyen spoke at length, sharing stories and information. Jack learned about Tyen's family, the challenges they faced, and the threats looming over their people. Tyen spoke of raids, encroachments, and the constant struggle to maintain safety and independence in a changing world. Jack shared what he knew about the land, the patterns of travel, and ways to remain alert and prepared. Though their worlds were different, there was common ground in their goals: protection, survival, and care for those who could not protect themselves. The sisters listened quietly at first, then gradually joined the conversation. Aylin asked questions about safety, about how to recognize danger, and about the land itself. Naya, more reserved, asked questions about animals and water, about finding food and shelter in the desert. Jack answered patiently, demonstrating his knowledge and offering practical advice. The sisters began to feel empowered, learning that they could navigate this world with guidance rather than simply being at its mercy. As the day progressed, the initial tension eased into mutual understanding. Jack observed Tyann closely, admiring the father's dedication and wisdom. It was clear that Tyann's offer was not just about assistance. It was about forming a bridge of trust, a partnership based on respect and shared responsibility. Jack realized that this could be an opportunity to step beyond his solitary life, to become part of something meaningful. He also knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he felt ready to face it. By late afternoon, Jack, Tyann, Alan, and Naya were all outside, walking through the small stretch of desert near the cabin. Tyann pointed out areas where the land could be used for safe travel, places where water might be found, and signs to watch for that could indicate danger. Jack added his own observations, combining his knowledge of the terrain with Tyann's understanding of people and patterns. The sisters listened attentively, absorbing the lessons and feeling more confident with each step. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert, Tyann paused and turned to Jack. "Your help will not be easy," he said quietly. "There will be trials, moments of fear, and times when you may question your choices. But your heart has shown that it is capable of compassion and courage." "For that, I trust you," Jack nodded, understanding the weight of those words. He felt a sense of resolve growing within him, a determination to honor the trust placed in him. That evening, back at the cabin, the four of them sat around a small fire. The sisters, now more relaxed, shared small stories from their childhood, speaking of family traditions, games, and memories that had survived despite loss. Tyann listened, nodding thoughtfully while Jack offered gentle encouragement, asking questions and showing genuine interest. The atmosphere was one of cautious warmth, a blend of relief, curiosity, and growing connection. As night fell over the desert, Jack found a quiet moment to step outside. The stars stretched endlessly above, as brilliant and silent as ever. He thought about the day's events, the arrival of Tyann, the surprising offer, the tentative bond that was forming between them all. His life, once defined by solitude and routine, had shifted in a single day. The quiet desert held new possibilities, challenges, and connections, and Jack felt ready to embrace them. He knew the journey ahead would not be simple, but he also knew that together they could face whatever the future held. As the fire flickered inside, casting warm light on the cabin walls, Jack felt a rare sense of belonging. He had come into their lives by chance, offering safety and care. Now he had been invited into a world larger than his own, a world where his skills, his knowledge, and his heart could make a difference. The sisters slept nearby, their faces peaceful for the first time in many nights, and Tyann rested as well, knowing his daughters were safe and that he had found an ally in Jack. The night was calm, but it carried with it the promise of new beginnings, challenges, and a bond that would grow stronger with each passing day. The days that followed were unlike anything Jack McAllister had experienced in years. Life in the cabin, once quiet and solitary, had grown busier, filled with purpose, learning, and connection. Tyann, the sister's father, had made it clear that the challenges facing his family were far from over. Jack knew that accepting the offer meant more than simple hospitality. It meant commitment, vigilance, and action. Yet, despite the weight of responsibility, he felt a quiet excitement. For the first time in years, he was no longer wandering through life alone. He was part of something bigger, something that mattered. Each morning began early. Jack would feed Daisy and prepare breakfast, while Tyann organized small lessons for the sisters. Alan and Naya were eager to learn, soaking in every bit of knowledge that might help them survive in the wild and protect themselves. Jack observed as the sisters practiced basic survival skills under Tyann's guidance, recognizing safe plants, finding water in hidden desert streams, and understanding subtle signs of animals or people nearby. The sisters moved carefully, but with growing confidence, each success building their courage and determination. Jack also took the opportunity to teach them, offering practical lessons from his own experience. He showed them how to ride safely across rocky terrain, how to move quietly without drawing attention, and how to use natural materials to create simple tools or signals. Island absorbed these lessons quickly, her focus sharp and determined, while Naya learned through observation, picking up details that often went unnoticed. Mad named Shard. The sisters complemented each other perfectly. Aelin bold and practical, Naya cautious and thoughtful. Jack was amazed at how resilient they were, their spirits unbroken even after all they had endured. Tyen watched these lessons closely, occasionally offering corrections or guidance. Jack respected the father's authority and knowledge, understanding that Tyen had spent years preparing his daughters to face a harsh world. The bond between Jack and Tyen grew stronger each day, rooted in mutual respect and shared goals. Though they came from very different worlds, they found common ground in their desire to protect those who could not protect themselves. Jack realized that this partnership could teach him as much as it taught the sisters, offering insight into courage, honor, and the strength of family. Evenings were quieter, yet still full of learning. After long days in the sun, the four of them would gather by the fire outside the cabin. Jack would tell stories of his travels across the plains and deserts, of challenges faced and lessons learned. Tyen would share tales of his people, of traditions, values, and history passed down through generations. Island and Naya listened eagerly, their eyes wide with wonder, absorbing not just the information, but the wisdom and values embedded within each story. Laughter and conversation began to fill the cabin, a warmth that had been absent for far too long. But despite the moments of joy, Jack knew that challenges were not far away. Tyen spoke often of threats, raiders, conflicts over land, and the constant uncertainty of life in the desert. Jack listened intently, thinking about strategies to help. He suggested simple defensive measures, ways to stay alert, and methods for the sisters to recognize danger. Tyen respected his experience and insight, and together they began creating a plan to ensure safety, not just for the cabin, but for journeys beyond it. The sisters practiced these lessons with growing skill. Island learned to notice subtle changes in the environment, the crunch of unfamiliar footsteps, the scent of approaching rain, or the shift of wind that carried sound differently. Naya, who had once been hesitant, now moved with quiet confidence, her eyes sharp and attentive. Jack could see the progress clearly, and it filled him with pride. These were no longer broken, fearful girls. They were survivors, learning to trust themselves and the guidance around them. One afternoon, Jack and Tyen took the sisters to a nearby canyon. The terrain was rocky, with narrow paths and sudden drops, a perfect place to practice both physical and mental agility. Jack demonstrated climbing techniques, showing how to use footholds carefully and test the stability of rocks before stepping. The sisters tried for themselves, their determination unwavering even when they stumbled or grew tired. Jack offered encouragement rather than correction, helping them understand that mistakes were part of learning, and resilience came from persistence. Tyen added lessons about observation and awareness. He pointed out distant tracks in the sand, noting which animals had passed and what their behavior might indicate. He explained how to spot changes in the sky and wind that could signal approaching weather or travelers. Jack was impressed by Tyen's knowledge, realizing how deeply connected the man was to his land and its patterns. Together, Jack and Tyen created a combination of skills, modern survival techniques and traditional wisdom that made the sisters more capable than they could have imagined. During these excursions, the sisters' personalities began to shine more fully. Island displayed leadership, often helping Naya navigate tricky paths and encouraging her sister to keep moving. Naya, thoughtful and meticulous, noticed small details that others overlooked, like subtle changes in the wind or the movement of distant birds. Jack admired how they complemented each other, their bond strengthened by shared experiences and mutual support. By our time, he realized that their survival had not just been physical, but deeply emotional. Their ability to rely on each other was as important as any skill they could learn. Back at the cabin, Jack introduced simple routines for self-care and organization. He taught them how to store food safely, maintain equipment, and organize their space for efficiency and comfort. Though it seemed mundane, these routines gave the sisters a sense of control and stability, something that had been absent in their lives for so long. Jack noticed how small gestures, like neatly arranging tools or preparing food, helped the sisters regain confidence and a sense of normalcy. One evening, after a particularly long day of lessons and exploration, the group sat around the fire in comfortable silence. The sky was filled with stars, bright and endless above them. Tyen spoke softly, sharing reflections on resilience and courage. "Life is not always easy," he said, "but the strength to survive comes from heart, mind, and unity. Alone, we are fragile. Together, we are strong." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of his own experiences reflected in Tyen's words. The sisters listened intently, absorbing the wisdom as much as the warmth of the fire. That night, as Jack prepared the cabin for rest, he noticed how much had changed in such a short time. Aelin and Naya were no longer timid and fearful. They moved with purpose and confidence. Their laughter, though quiet, filled the space with life. Tyen's presence brought a sense of security and guidance, and Jack, once a lonely wanderer, felt a growing sense of belonging, connection, and purpose. The lessons of the day had not just been about survival. They were about trust, courage, and the bonds that make life meaningful. Sleep came easier for everyone that night. Jack watched the sisters settle in, their faces peaceful, and then looked at Tyen, who sat quietly, gazing at the fire. There was mutual respect between them, a recognition that their combined efforts could make a difference in the world around them. Jack felt a quiet determination growing inside him. The desert was still harsh, and challenges would come, but together they were building strength that could withstand almost anything. In the weeks that followed, the bond among Jack, Tyen, Aelin, and Naya grew stronger. Daily routines became familiar and comforting. Lessons were repeated until skills became instinctive. Laughter and conversation replaced fear and tension. Jack realized that this partnership, born of necessity and trust, was transforming all of their lives. The sisters' courage inspired him, Tyen's wisdom guided him, and their growing trust created a sense of family he had long thought impossible. Yet, amidst this peace, Jack remained vigilant. He knew that the world beyond the cabin was unpredictable. The lessons were not just practice. They were preparation for challenges that would come. Jack's heart, once hardened by loss and solitude, was opening to connection, but he never allowed complacency to creep in. He understood that safety was earned through awareness, preparedness, and cooperation. By the end of Part 4, Jack understood that his life had irrevocably changed. He was no longer a lone cowboy wandering the desert. He was a teacher, a protector, a friend, and an ally. The sisters, once broken and afraid, were growing strong and confident. Tyen's offer, shocking at first, had opened the door to a world of purpose, trust, and family. Jack knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready to face them, knowing that together they could overcome almost anything. The desert, once empty and lonely, now felt alive with hope, courage, and the promise of a new beginning. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, spilling golden light across the rugged landscape. Jack McAllister stood outside his cabin, taking a deep breath of the crisp, clean air. Daisy, his loyal horse, nickered softly beside him, her ears flicking toward the distant canyon. Today would be different from the quiet days they had shared so far. Tyan had spoken of a journey, one that would test their skills, courage, and the bond they had built over the past weeks. For the first time, Jack felt a mixture of anticipation and determination. He knew that the challenges ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that together they could face them. Inside the cabin, Island and Naya were already awake, moving with a quiet confidence that would have been impossible just weeks ago. Aylin packed a small satchel with essentials, water, food, and a few simple tools that Jack had shown them how to use. Naya followed, carefully folding a blanket and checking that the small supplies they carried were secure. Jack observed them with a sense of pride. These two young women, once fearful and uncertain, were now prepared to face the world outside the safety of the cabin. Their courage, resilience, and determination had grown each day, and he knew that this journey would only strengthen them further. Tyan arrived shortly after, his presence calm but commanding. He inspected their supplies and offered gentle advice. "Remember what we have practiced," he said. "Observe the land, listen to its signs, and trust your instincts. Danger is always near, but knowledge and awareness are stronger than fear." Jack nodded, echoing the sentiment. "We've prepared as best we can," he said, "and we'll look out for each other every step of the way." The sisters listened attentively, absorbing each word. Their eyes were bright with determination, their expressions focused yet calm. The fear that had once held them captive was now replaced with resolve. The group set out on foot, leaving the safety of the cabin behind. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast expanse of sand, rocks, and sparse vegetation. The air was warm but not harsh, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant mountains. Jack led the way, his eyes scanning the terrain for signs of potential danger, while Tyan walked beside the sisters, offering guidance and encouragement. The sisters moved carefully but with growing confidence, applying the lessons they had learned under Jack's and Tyan's instruction. As they walked, Jack taught them how to read the subtle signs of the desert. He showed them how to recognize the tracks of animals and people, how to judge the direction of the wind, and how to find hidden water sources. Tyan added his knowledge of the land, pointing out plants that could be used for food, medicine, or signaling, and explaining the behaviors of wildlife that might indicate danger. The sisters absorbed each lesson, practicing carefully, asking questions, and demonstrating skills that were far beyond what they could have imagined a few weeks ago. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon. The walls rose high above them, casting shadows that provided shelter from the sun. Jack suggested they rest for a while, allowing the sisters to regain their energy. They sat together on flat rocks, eating small portions of food and drinking water. Aylin looked around the canyon, her eyes sharp and attentive, noticing every detail, the shapes of the rocks, the movement of birds, the rustle of leaves. Naya, more reflective, observed the patterns of the shadows, the changes in the wind, and the subtle signs of life around them. Jack smiled inwardly. The sisters' awareness had grown remarkably, their minds and bodies tuned to the land as if it had always been a part of them. After the break, Jack and Tyan decided to practice a series of exercises designed to strengthen both skill and trust. They instructed the sisters to navigate a small path up the canyon wall, using handholds and footholds to climb carefully. Jack demonstrated first, moving with steady precision, testing each step for stability. Island followed, her movements confident and deliberate, carefully applying the techniques Jack had taught her. Naya climbed next, her careful attention to detail allowing her to move silently and efficiently. Jack and Tyan provided encouragement and guidance, reinforcing the skills that would keep the sisters safe in the world outside the canyon. As the day progressed, the group encountered small challenges. A narrow ledge that required careful balance, a sudden shift in loose rocks, and a small creek that needed to be crossed without slipping. Each obstacle was met with patience, cooperation, and problem-solving. Jack observed how the sisters worked together, supporting each other and applying their lessons. Island offered guidance when Naya hesitated, and Naya's careful observations helped them avoid hidden dangers. The partnership between the four of them had grown strong, rooted in trust, respect, and shared experience. By late afternoon, they reached a plateau overlooking the desert below. The view stretched for miles. Red cliffs, winding canyons, and distant mesas bathed in golden sunlight. Jack took a moment to let them appreciate the vastness and beauty of the land. "The desert can be harsh," he said, "but it is also full of life, strength, and lessons. Every challenge you face here teaches you something, not just about survival, but about yourself." Island and Naya nodded, their eyes reflecting both understanding and wonder. Tyan smiled, pleased with the progress his daughters had made. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the plateau, Jack noticed a distant cloud of dust rising in the distance. He signaled to the group to stop and observe carefully. Using the skills they had practiced, they identified the movement as a small group of travelers approaching from the east. Jack and Tyan discussed quietly, deciding to wait and observe rather than reveal themselves immediately. The sisters listened attentively, applying the techniques they had learned, analyzing tracks, wind, and movement to assess the situation. Their awareness had sharpened, allowing them to participate actively in decision-making, rather than simply following orders. The travelers passed without noticing them, and the group continued their journey, careful but confident. Jack reflected on how far they had come. The sisters, once timid and uncertain, now moved with purpose, applying skills, observing their surroundings, and supporting one another. Tyan had taught them values of courage, respect, and patience, while Jack had provided practical knowledge and guidance. Together, they had transformed fear into confidence, vulnerability into strength. Night fell over the desert, bringing cool air and a sky filled with stars. The group set up a small camp, using blankets and firewood to create a safe and comfortable space. Jack ensured the fire was carefully contained, and Tyan organized the sleeping arrangements so that everyone felt secure. Aelin and Naya, now tired but energized from the day's experiences, sat close to the fire, sharing small stories and reflections. They spoke of their growth, the lessons they had learned, and the courage they had discovered within themselves. Jack listened, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and connection. Before sleep, Jack and Tyan reviewed plans for the following day. They discussed possible routes, sources of water, and areas where danger might arise. Jack noticed that the sisters now contributed ideas and observations, demonstrating critical thinking and awareness. The partnership had evolved from teacher-student to a collaborative team, each member contributing their knowledge and skills. The bonds they had built, trust, respect, and shared experience, were now strong enough to face challenges with confidence. As the group settled down for the night, Jack looked at the sisters sleeping nearby. Their faces were calm, peaceful, and free from the fear that had once haunted them. He reflected on how a chance encounter, a simple act of kindness, had changed all their lives. Island and Naya had gone from being broken and afraid to being strong, capable, and hopeful. Tyan had found an ally in Jack, someone who respected his values and shared his commitment to protection and family. And Jack himself had discovered a sense of purpose, connection, and belonging he had long thought impossible. The fire crackled softly, and the desert night was calm. Jack knew that challenges would continue to come, that dangers and difficulties were part of life in the desert, but he also knew that together they could face anything. The skills, courage, and trust they had developed would guide them through the unknown, providing strength in the face of uncertainty. As he closed his eyes, Jack felt a sense of peace and determination. The lonely cowboy was no longer alone. He was part of a family, a partnership built on trust, care, and shared experience. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but the path was clear. Jack, Tyan, Elon, and Naya would move forward together, facing the challenges of the world with courage and unity. The desert, once a place of solitude and danger, was now filled with connection, learning, and hope. Their story, which began with fear and hardship, was evolving into one of strength, resilience, and new beginnings. Jack realized that life, even after loss and loneliness, could bring unexpected bonds, purpose, and joy. As the night deepened and the stars shone brighter, Jack silently promised himself that he would protect the sisters and honor the trust placed in him by Tyan. Together they would face the desert, its challenges, and whatever the future held. The journey was just beginning, but Jack knew one thing for certain: no one would walk alone again. Together they had found strength, courage, and the beginnings of a family that could withstand the harshest trials.